Joel said this is kind of like I don't know if a session at WWDC, which is true. It was inspired by that session. There's a session called Hidden Gems in Cocoa and Cocoa Touch from this year's WWDC. Uh, our talk is inspired by that talk, but it's not as good. So, yeah, is this working? Okay, I think it's just me not pointing. I'm not going to screw around with it too much. So go watch that talk, because if you want a bunch of really cool hidden gems. So just a little story. I was actually sitting in that session there at WWDC, and they said like how many of you think you're already going to know all of this? Oh yeah, and I raised my hand. A few other people raised our hands. I was joking. I didn't think I would, but needed some people to say that, and they said no one in this room knows everything we're going to talk about. And it was true. There was really cool stuff that I had never seen before in my life. So go watch that talk. But we wanted to try to come up with some more hidden gems, some things that were not in that presentation. And we also tried to not duplicate NS Hipster too much. So many of you guys probably know about NS Hipster, which is a website by Matt with 3 T's Thompson. It's just a bunch of this kind of stuff, like stuff you probably don't know about in Cocoa and Objective-C. And it's great. It's a great site. So go check that out. But we tried not to duplicate that too much, so some of our gems are maybe a little more obscure, but we hope we have some good stuff and that there's at least something for everybody. And I'm going to give it to Aaron for the first one.
Okay. First one, definitely not covered in NS Hipster or WWDC. How many skiers here know where this is? This is a real gem. This is up Mineral Fork, late March. People usually overlook it because it's got a low trailhead, so the snow's usually melting out. But if you hit it in a March storm, it's like an hour-and-a-half hike in, beautiful powder, nobody there. Don't poach it all, okay?
He's a full-time skier, so that was the gem. I'll try to do something a little more relevant. But it's a little advanced, so the first gem is NS data reading mapped if safe. So you have a problem here. Say you've got a 1 gigabyte file that's on disk, and you need to read that into memory, and you want to look at a little piece of it and do something. Well, it's really easy, right, to initialize an NS data with the contents of that file and then seek to a certain offset and do something, right? The problem is you just loaded the whole file into memory, and it's a gigabyte. And it's not so great. And you also just had a 1 gigabyte disk hit. NS data reading mapped if safe, which is an option you pass to NS data, can't remember the init with contents of file URL. What this does is it does the same thing as mmap, which is a function that is part of POSIX, I think. That it essentially takes a file on disk and makes it appear to your program as if it's some data in memory. So you can use it. You can access the contents of that file using normal memory access, like a pointer. But really, it's still just on disk. It didn't all get loaded into memory. It's loaded in as needed when you access it. So there's a C function, mmap, for doing that. But NS data actually has the ability to do this too. So it can be faster to initialize because you're not hitting the disk for a gigabyte or whatever all at once. And the big thing for me is it uses much less memory. So I'll just go right into some example code. This is way smaller than I thought it was going to be. So I apologize, but that's just file path. So for 1 gigabyte file, and then we load up some data with init with contents of file. And then really all we want to do is sum up the last 10 bytes. This is completely contrived, but okay, so we're going to sum up the last 10 bytes. And we do that in a little loop. It's not fancy. And let's look at our memory usage doing that. So all I did is ran this program. It's 955.7 megabytes is what Activity Monitor reports. Well, that's not great. That really, the sample code for this is in the slides, or in the GitHub repo for the presentation. That's real. So the only change I'm going to make is use NS data reading mapped if safe for the options, and look at that. Memory goes down to 2.1 megabytes, and the program performs the exact same function. So there are some caveats. NS data reading mapped if safe. The if safe means that the operating system or the APIs have a choice, and they may not actually map the data, in which case memory usage would be just as high as before. There's also an NS data reading mapped always option that will sort of force it, but then you have to worry about issues where the file gets written at the same time you're reading or something. I don't actually, I can't really speak authoritatively about all the issues involved there, but it's something to be aware of, but this is a cool thing to know. All right, the next slide, sort of following off my OS 10 talk last session, is NS tree node. So this is OS 10 only, so iOS programmers, you can ignore it, but it's just a little class that makes it easy to build tree structures with arbitrary model objects. So it's pretty generic. It's got a super simple API, a represented object property, and an array of children, and a parent property, and like an isLeaf property. But it also has support for sorting the tree with sort descriptors, and the children are key value observing observable. So it's bindings compatible, and that's actually sort of what it's really for, is for not just bindings, but for populating an NS outline view. But you can use it for other stuff too. So it's anytime you want to have a tree structure, think about this.
Okay. Simple one. There's the new NS Enum Macro. I use it all the time. I hate finding code where people have done one of the above or some combination thereof, but not enough to achieve the total effect of using the Enum macro, which is to both associate storage and a type with the values of an enum to make them show up as method parameters and therefore give you type safety when you're using enums for method parameters. So the first example just defines some integers, just gives them symbol names. The second one defines an enum type, but it doesn't associate the type with the storage. The third defines the type and the storage, but doesn't associate them together. So short explanation is use NS enum, please. So I had the pleasure of writing a camera app called Couplet that was the first of the front-back cameras, except it wasn't named so well and didn't perform so well in the App Store. But I learned a bunch of things about working with AV Foundation, and I've since worked on some other camera apps. And so anybody who's going to write a camera app, please heed these things so that people don't have to wait for your camera. The first being the session. It's just a session. So when your app launches, you're just telling the system, hey, I want access to the inputs. Don't keep stopping and starting it. That's going to lead to horrible performance. Start it when the app launches. Keep it running as long as possible. If you find that it stopped, go ahead and start it again, but only if you need to. The video preview layer. That's also expensive to set up. And anytime you put it in another view and it shows up on the screen and your session is running, it'll get data. So if you're doing something fancy after you capture an image, don't throw that preview layer away. Just remove it from its parent layer. It's not going to take up a ton of memory. It's expensive to set up. And typically you just set it on your session, let the session own it. And finally, minimize the animations. I mean, we know the animations are expensive. Capturing huge images off of the sensor is expensive. Trying to do those both at once is going to cause a conflict for resources. So you'll notice that it's disappeared from the built-in camera app, the shutter animation. It's never been in other apps like Camera Plus, which was a really popular alternative one. So capture your image, do something with the image. Don't waste time with animations because users care about the image being captured, not how fancy your shutter is. Finally, for camera performance tips, stay in the data or the pixel buffer as long as possible. Creating that UI image is expensive. It's going to blow out your memory. When you're capturing images, you're already bumping along at the headroom of the memory for your app. So, if you're going to filter it, just go through data into core image, create that core image from the data, do your processing, pop out the UI image later. And also, if you're doing a bunch of filtering or editing, save that full-size image to disk, work with a lower resolution image until such time that the user wants to share that image or save it again.
You guys should go check Couplet out. It's a cool app, even if it failed. I actually use it. So, all right. So I gotta start this off by saying this is new in iOS 7. I think. I don't know. I couldn't get it to work, so this is a dumb gem because it doesn't work. But it's supposed to work, so I'll go through it, and maybe somebody else knows why it doesn't work. So anyway, the problem is this: you've got a string in your app that you show to the user, and say it says tells you how many files are selected in a list or something like that, and you want it to be smart about how many files are selected. So you say, well, if there's one item, then a file is selected. If there are multiple items, then say, 10 files are selected. The number of files are selected. Well, that's not too bad, right? It's just one if statement. But what if you want to do it in Arabic? This is the equivalent in Arabic. I mean, it's in English, but it's like what you'd have to do if you wanted to do this in Arabic. Because they have a different sentence structure depending on if you've got 0 items, a single item, 2 items, pockle items. I don't know what that means, but it's like a few. Possil, it's like paucity. I don't know how you say that, but and then more than that, right? So that's getting pretty unwieldy, and this is for one language, but it's different for a different language, and that's not so good if you've got these kind of structures for localization in your code. It also means that you can't put an app out there and then localize it without making changes in your code. So how do you solve this? Well, it's new. You can use this localized string with format API just like we've always had with an NS localized string, and I screwed that code up because there should be another argument on the end, which is the number of files variable, but pretend that's there. And then you have a strings dict file, which is you guys, if you've done any localization, you have localization.strings. Well, that's this file with the original string in the base localization, and then the the localized string, and it's a resource file. It's loaded at runtime. Strings dict is sort of the same thing, except it's a plist with a dictionary, an XML plist with a dictionary, and you can. I'm not going to go through this in too much detail, but using this format here, you can actually specify rules in that language, the language the strings dict file is for localizing a formatted string like that. And it will just figure it out for you. So if the variable passed in for the %d placeholder is 1, it'll use your format here for 1 and say a person is select. I screwed this up again because that should say like file. This should say files, not people. But sorry about that. A person is selected, or no one is selected, or for 0, or for 2 people are selected. And then if you've got more, you can actually just use the %d like we saw. So this is a way that you can do this complex, sort of complex rules of for pluralization without these crazy if constructs like I showed before. But like I said, it doesn't work, and I've got posts on the developer forums and no answer. So sorry about that. I don't know. Maybe it's bugged. Maybe it's not actually in iOS 7, and it's like a mistake that it says it is. So, all right. So this is kind of duplicating because I know this has been on NS Hipster, but I still wanted to talk about it because these are some of my favorites. So I called this one Fancy Collections, and my definition of fancy collections is NS map table, NS hash table, and NS pointer array. And these are essentially collection classes, just like NS array, NS mutable array, NS mutable set, and NS mutable dictionary, except that you can configure, you, the user of the API, can configure the memory management and equality comparison and hashing semantics. So what that means is, for NS pointer array, it's a lot like an NS mutable array, except that it can store arbitrary pointers, so not just objects. You can store a pointer to anything in it. It can store null values. So you know how if you've got an NS mutable array and you want an empty slot, you have to put an NS null in there. You don't have to do that with NS pointer array. It's got built-in support for storing nulls. It can hold a weak reference to its content. So if you want an array that has zeroing weak references to the stuff in it instead of retaining them, you can do that with an NS pointer array. And if you really have something fancy in mind, or, I mean, I think there are rare times when there's a use case for this, but you can actually specify your own custom retain, release, comparison, and description methods that this will use. And then one thing that's kind of fun is you can explicitly set the count. So you have an empty array. Well, an NS mutable array, if it's empty, it's got 0 things in it. Well, what if you want an empty array, but it's 100 things long, and then, like with placeholders? Well, you can do that with NS pointer array. You can call set count, and it will expand if the count you give it is bigger than the current count, and just fill the new slots with nulls. If you make it smaller, it'll automatically delete the stuff that you've cut off the end. Kind of cool. So that works just fine in a NS pointer array. You can just add a null. But one thing to note is that it's add pointer, not add object. But you can just put a null in there, and then when you fast enumerate it, you just get a null out, which is pretty cool. That's that. So NS hash table is sort of the same idea, but it's like NS mutable set. You can store arbitrary pointers, hold weak references, use custom retain, release, comparison, hash, and description methods. And optionally, there's actually a pure C API that you can use that's actually recommended if you're going to store arbitrary pointers, but you can use a pure C API to manipulate NS hash tables. I don't know if I have a reason why you'd want a pure C API for that, but it is there. It also has an Objective-C interface, of course. So the things here, NS hash table is something I've actually used fairly often. This is if you use weak properties when you don't want a strong reference to the thing that the property references. But what if you want a collection of weak things, right? Well, you can't really do that with NS mutable set because it retains its contents. With NS hash table, you can just use this weak objects hash table method and get a hash table that will not retain its contents. It'll have zeroing weak references to them under ARC. Under manual memory management, they're not zeroed, and under garbage collection, things are a little different too. But of course, you shouldn't be using garbage collection. And then you can also get a strong objects hash table, which is really just like an NS mutable set. And unless you're using some of the other features like the custom hashing or something like that, there's not really a reason to use that probably very often. And then the last one is NS map table. Like this is like NS mutable dictionary, kind of the same story. The thing that's cool about this is that it doesn't have to copy its keys. So if you've ever tried to stick some custom or class that does not support copying, NS copying, into use it as the key in a dictionary, well, that doesn't work. NS dictionary requires its keys to implement NS copying because it copies them when you use them, and there's a very good reason for that. So I want to have the caveat that don't use this unless you know what you're doing, because there's a reason NS dictionary copies its keys. It's because it doesn't want them to change out from under it. But assuming you can guarantee that they won't change, you can use NS map table, and it does not have to copy its keys. It's an option, but and it can actually hold weak references to either its keys or its objects or both. So you can kind of configure that whole thing. And the 4 methods that you use to get these with the default configurations are strong to strong, strong to weak, weak to strong, and weak to weak objects map table. So the first strong or weak is the key, the way it references its keys, and the second one is the way it references its objects. For all 3 of those, there's a lot more to them that are not in these slides, so go read the documentation. These are all in Foundation on both Mac and iOS. So Aaron.
Whoa, that was intense. All right, thing I use all the time is Xcode snippets. Just enables you to put your boilerplate code or other patterns into Xcode and just drag it out whenever you need it. You go to the code snippet library in the utilities panel, and you can just drag text in there, or you'll find existing code snippets. It used to be organized in Xcode 4, separating user and predefined snippets, but now they're all glommed together. You can name them. You can edit various properties on them. Once you create one, you can give it a summary. You can define it being for iOS or macOS. You can specify the type of the language, its completion shortcut, its completion scope. My favorite is to do the weak type of self, weak self, self, for whenever you have a block that might be copied if you pass it some method or something like that, to avoid retain cycles. There's a ton of them up on Matt Thompson's GitHub Xcode snippets repo. I'd suggest just cloning that and dragging it all into Xcode. The nice feature is when you create it, if you use the angle bracket pound some name pound angle bracket, that'll be available for autocomplete. And so you can make really powerful snippets that save you time typing code. Because you want to be typing less code and typing more Xcode key shortcuts. Because the big pain with Xcode is there's all these buttons and toggles, and you're an interface builder, and you're opening the project navigator panel, and you're opening the utilities pane, or you're toggling between the standard editor and the assistant editor or the version editor. And so that's a lot of mouse time. But if you know these key shortcuts, you're going to spend a lot of time with your fingers on the keyboard and less time on the mouse. So command click, jump to definition. So you're digging through some code, and you want to know about a method. Maybe jump to the header. Just command click that method, boom, you're at the header. Option click brings up quick documentation. With Xcode 5 and automatic documentation support for properly formatted comments, even in your own code or other people's code who are commenting properly, you're going to get great documentation. Command slash for the current line or the current selection, you're going to toggle comments. Super fast and easy if you want to just get rid of a block for a second. Command Shift F for find in project. Combine that with Command E to use the current selection as the for find, and you get super fast find. So you just double click some method name or some symbol name, Command E, Command Shift F, boom, shows you everything in the project that's using that. Command 0 toggles the navigator panel. Command Option 0 toggles the utilities panel. So sometimes you want to jump in there, find something, and then you want to get back to coding. Boom, boom, and then you got the standard editor right in front of you. With the standard editor in front of you, Command Return, standard editor. Option Command Return shows the assistant editor. So you get the, if you have the header automatically shown for your implementation file or something like that. Command Shift Return shows the version editor. Control 6 brings up the function menu with the search box already selected. So Control 6, start typing. You can jump right to that function or method in your current implementation file. AV Speech Synthesizer, new in iOS 7. This one does work. We have a neat little demo. It's pretty simple. You're not going to build a whole app around it necessarily, but it does give you the ability, without trying to hack accessibility, to have speech feedback in your app. Pretty simple. It's an AV foundation. You get an AV speech synthesizer. You set up an utterance from a string, and you set the rate of that utterance. The default rate is probably not what you want. Comes out pretty fast. So we set it to minimum speech rate here. And then we just have the synthesizer speak the utterance. And then you can interrupt the the speaking either on boundary word or boundary immediately, depending on your needs.
I guess we'll do the demos at the end. All right, so how many of you have done date calculations in your app? And how many of you have gotten date calculations wrong in your app? Yeah, me too. So date calculations are hard. I think anybody who has really tried to do their own date calculations has figured this out. And it's true, they really are hard. There are a lot of reasons for that, but I think sort of the primary reasons are that the date system humans use is inconsistent throughout history, and it's also inconsistent in the future. So we have leap days and leap seconds, and we have leap years that we skip every so often, and there are time zones that are on that are half an hour ahead of other time zones, and just crazy stuff. So the real moral of the story is what I'll show here. Let's assume we want to generate a list of dates at the same time every day for 30 days starting with now. I got this example from a Stack Overflow question that generated a fair amount of discussion and probably 3 answers telling how to do this that were completely wrong. And I commented on all those answers and said, no, this won't work. It'll produce incorrect results. And people argued for a long time. Like, no, it's right. It'll work. But the example I'm going to show you is from one of those answers. So it's pretty easy, right? You have an array of dates that you're going to fill up. You get the current date, which is now. You know how many seconds are in a day. You just multiply 24 hours by 60 minutes in an hour by 60 seconds. And then go through 30 times through a for loop. And, well, you multiply I by how many seconds are in a day. This day's past, I don't know why it's named that. It's named wrong. I really did copy that of Stack Overflow question. And then you basically add, however many, that's 80, somebody could probably tell me, but that's 80 some odd thousand. Yeah, 86,400 seconds in a day. Well, you just add that to the current date, and hey, you got a date that's exactly 24 hours from now, so it's same time tomorrow, right? Well, it's actually pretty easy to figure out how this fails. It fails anytime you have daylight savings time, for example, because on the day before daylight savings, 24 hours from now, is not the same time tomorrow. It's either an hour before the current time or an hour after, because you gain or lose an hour. And in fact, if you're unlucky and the starting time for this is right before the time change at 2 a.m. or whenever that is, you could end up with 2 days in a row that are the same, 2 dates in a row that are 24 hours apart but on the same calendar day. So there are a lot of ways for this kind of thing to fail, and this is a simple example, but there are many other more complex problems that you get into with any kind of date calculation. So what's the solution? Well, the solution is use the APIs, use the stuff that's there to do correct date calculation, because smarter people than you have spent a lot longer on figuring out how to get this right than you're going to be able to spend, and you should leverage their work. So what's the hidden gem? Well, so first I want to say, well, there was actually a way to solve this in iOS 6. This is a new gem, something that's new in iOS 7. You could do something like this. So you define a function that's calendar day after date, and this is just a function that's going to take a date in and give us a date on the next day. And there was an API for this. You have a components instance, and you set data 1, and then you use this date by adding components to date option 0 method, and then same kind of thing, go through a loop, but call that function instead. Well, that's fine. In iOS 7, there are a whole bunch of new methods, especially on NS Calendar. I think there's a few on NS Date Components, but anyway, the majority of these new methods are on NS Calendar that make some of these common scenarios easier. So it's a lot of stuff that was possible before, but with kind of a lot more thinking and method calls and Googling and finding Stack Overflow questions where a bunch of people had the wrong answer, and then finally somebody came along with the right one, and that kind of thing. So you could solve this now like this. So there's this new date by adding unit toDate method, and you just call that, and it'll give you a date that's 1 day from today, right? Or whatever, or 1 hour from now, or whatever you want. So I guess the next thing is let's do something that's a little more interesting. Let's find the next Friday, the 13th in October. It wasn't this year, or it's not going to be this year. I mean, because tomorrow's the 13th and it's not Friday. Let's find out when that is. Well, there's this API. Enumerate dates starting after date, matching components, options using block. What this will do is it'll take a start date, in this case today's date, and it will find a date. It will find all the dates after now that match the components that you give it. And so we want a date that's in October on the 13th and a Friday. The weekday property is a number from 1 to 7 that's depends on the calendar, but in the Gregorian calendar, it's which is what we're using. 1 is Sunday, 2 is Monday, etc. That might actually be dependent on locale, but I don't think so. Is it? Okay. Well, so this will also depend on the current locale. There's probably some way to figure that out. I don't have it in my slide. So be aware, that's another problem with dates, is that they're not the same in all countries, the way they're reckoned. And there's still the Chinese calendar and the Arabic calendar and the Hebrew calendar. They're all different, but there are APIs for working with those calendars. So anyway, this prints out. It's 2017. We'll have a Friday the 13th in October. I just thought that was kind of cool. Here, this is not even sort of an exhaustive list. It's just kind of a few cool ones. There's a start of day for date, so this will just give you the beginning of the day for the date you pass in. There's is date in same day as date, so it does what it says. It tells you if 2 dates are on the same day. Tomorrow, weekend. I think the weekend one's kind of cool because it tells you if a date is a weekend. And then date by setting hour, minute, seconds, second to date options. That's you might have a date that's on a certain day, but you want a certain time on that date, so that'll do that for you. And for a complete list, see the iOS 7 Foundation release notes. It's actually a really long list. It's way more than the 5 I showed there, but I just couldn't fit them all. So.
All right, that was a little risky given that we have a localization expert in the audience today. So remember, everybody was livid and insane with rage because the iPhone didn't have copy and paste. And so we finally got it with 3.0. We got this awesome way to select text, but we got this little nice menu. And with 3.2 and the iPad, we actually got the ability to add custom edit menu actions. So I'm here to say that where are all my menus? Most apps I use just don't use custom menus at all, and it's a great opportunity. So go forth and add the menus, because the edit menu is not just for text fields and text views. Any UIKit class, for example, UI label or UI image view, if you implement can become first responder and can perform action with sender, then you can respond to the standard UI responder standard edit actions, or you can add your own custom actions. So, for example, you want to add a custom menu action called flip. So you've got your view controller, and you handle a touch or a gesture, and you create a menu control. Well, you get the shared instance of the menu controller, and you add that menu item to the menu controller, and you set its target rect for display, and say in this case you've subclassed UI image view, and you had a recognizer on that, so you set the target rect to be the bounds of the recognizer's view, and you do it in the recognizer's view, and then you set the menu to visible. Boom. You've got an edit menu with this custom command that enables some really unique interactions in your app without having to write your own non-standard menu controller.
Yeah, UI menu controller is great. You really can, and if it makes sense, should use it for things other than just text editing. This is another one that's kind of a duplicate because I know NS Hipster's done this, and I don't know if it was in the WWDC talk, but I still like them. So, KVC collection operators, KVC is key value coding. They allow you to perform actions that would otherwise be several lines, sometimes several lines of code, of your own code, just using key paths, key value coding. And they're basically just specialized key paths that you pass as the parameter to value for key path. So they have a format which is always hard to remember, and I always have to look it up, so it's okay if you have to look it up. But it's the key path to the collection. So that's the collection of stuff. These are all for collections, but it's the collection of objects that you want to perform the operator on. And then the collection operator, and all the collection operators start with an @ symbol. That's how you can tell they're not just regular, parts of a key path. And then after that, the key path to the property that you want that to operate on. And you'll see that in a second. So you specify a particular aggregate function whose result can be returned or chained. And so it's just like any other key path. You can chain these together. The type of the object that you get back depends on the operator. So there are three kinds of these operators. There's simple collection operators, and they return strings, numbers, or dates depending on the value on the right hand of the key. So you'll see these in a minute, but it just means that if you use one of those operators, you'll get a string, a number, or a date, depending on what the objects in the collection are, if they're strings, numbers, or dates. Object operators return an array, and array and set operators return an array or a set, depending on the operator. And those are easy to figure out because they have array or set in the name. And then these can all be used. They're not specific to OS 10. They're part of key value coding, but they can be used as part of Cocoa bindings on OS 10. So if you saw my Mac talk, you saw Cocoa bindings. You can use these in some clever ways with bindings. So the simple operators, I'm going to go through these kind of quick because it's boring otherwise, but @average gives you the average. So like you have an array of numbers. Well, normally you'd have to loop through those, sum them up, divide by the count. With @average, you can just do key value for value for key path, and then the collection, and then .average. So it's super easy. Same with @count, gives you the count. Max and min give you the maximum and minimum values, and then sum does what you think, it sums them up. So those are all pretty self-explanatory, and these are the easy ones. Object operators. So you have distinct union of objects, @distinct union of objects, and union of objects. These they do the same thing as each other, except that the difference is union of objects. They both return arrays, but union of objects gives you, or distinct union of objects gives you something that it's an array, but it's kind of like a set in that it doesn't have any duplicates, so it strips duplicates out for you. Union of objects does not do that, does not strip duplicates. So, yeah, anyway, well, and I'll show you some examples of this in just a second. And then these operate on objects. And then the array and set operators operate on arrays and sets. So like if you have an array of arrays, you can use, or a set of sets, that kind of thing, you can use these. And again, the difference between union and distinct union is that distinct union strips duplicates, union doesn't. And this gives you this will sort of coalesce. So if you've got an array of arrays and you want all the objects in all the child arrays, that's what these are for. Well, or sets for distinct union of sets. The reason it's distinct union of sets and there's no just @union of sets is because sets always don't have duplicates. That's what a set, is kind of one of the things a set is for. It's not ordered and it doesn't have duplicates. Okay, so just to set these examples up, let's assume you've got 3 classes: company, department, and employee. Company has a property that's an array called managers. Department has an array that's employees, and it's got employees in it. Sorry, I can't believe how much I screwed these slides up. Don't put a keynote file in Git because they're not mergeable, and you screw things up when you try to merge them. That should say departments, not managers. Anyway, so let's have two departments, marketing and engineering. Marketing has Steve and Michelle working in it, and engineering has Bob, Jane, and Michelle. So Michelle is both in marketing and engineering. I know that's kind of weird, but I was trying to think of something. And then the company has these two departments, marketing and engineering. So what we've got is departments is an array of two arrays, marketing and engineering. And each of those is full of employees. And then an employee has a name and a salary. And we just set those up. I just gave them some random salaries. And it's just a number. So what if we want all the employees in the whole company? So we can just use departments, which is the collection that we're operating on, and then the @union of arrays, and then it's the employees that we want out of that array. That's the key path on departments that we want to get out, and that'll give us Steve, Michelle, Bob, Jane, and Michelle. Well, that's not quite what we wanted, because we wanted all the employees in the company, and there are not two Michelles. It's just that she's in two different departments. So that's the difference between union and distinct union. Distinct union will strip that duplicate out. So that shows you the difference. They're the same result, it's just that it's stripped the second Michelle out. Employees, let's see, that's the same thing. I don't know why I did that. Sorry. All right, well, we want to get the now we want to find some statistics about their salaries. So we can use this @min on the employee. Oh, the reason I'm showing that is because I just got the employees out in a separate array to make these shorter. So we can say @min.salary, and we get the minimum salary, which is somebody making 40,000, and then the maximum is somebody making 150,000. Average, that's all you have to do, and it does the sum up and divide by count. So 85,000, and then I did have a sum, but I guess it's gone. Anyway, that's KVC collection operator. You always have to look that up in the documentation if you're actually going to use it.
Okay, this kind of follows on working with collections, NS predicate subquery. So say you've got a collection of objects, and each of those objects has another collection of objects, and you want to filter everything on a property of collection A's objects and collection B's properties. Or you want to filter everything through A, but on collection B's objects properties, more than one of them. That's where subquery comes in. The syntax is it takes a collection, a variable, name, and then a predicate using that variable. And all of a sudden, Perl runs in from left field and jumps into your predicate syntax. So the variable is defined with the classic Perl $scalar syntax. But so say we had a collection of things, and we wanted to filter those things on name bar, but we wanted to filter the top level on name foo. Using a subquery is the only way that we can actually get this unique collection out. If we just filter on, say, any name foo and name bar, we're not going to get what we want. And that's why we use subquery. It works great anywhere predicates work, but please don't ever refer to it as a SQL subselect. Here's just a cute little one. I like it, and I keep running into old habits in myself and other people. There's just some great things that the compiler does for you now that you don't need to do anymore. You don't need to declare private methods in an internal class extension. Cut it out. It's just wasting space. Compiler doesn't need your help. Also, synthesizing instance variables for properties, unless you're doing some special, unique way of storing things, just let the compiler do it for you. And Andrew's going to talk about some more compiler stuff.
Can I also just say that you also don't need to explicitly declare instance variables in your @interface, assuming they're being used for a property. We got some code from a job applicant recently where he was doing that all over and had no reason for it. So you don't have to do that. All right, so Aaron talked about some stuff that the compiler does for you, and those things aren't actually new, but sometimes it can be a little confusing to keep track of which features. If you're targeting older versions of the OSs, it can be a little difficult to keep track of which features, which Objective-C features work on which uh, OS versions. And so Apple actually has this document called the Objective-C Feature Availability Index, which I've basically reproduced here, although theirs is a little more verbose, has a little more detail. But you can just find this by Googling Objective-C Feature Availability Index. And this will tell you exactly which features you can use with which versions of Xcode and the compiler, and also which versions of the OS they'll deploy to. So I'm not going to go through all these because the gem is just that this thing is out there. So if you can't remember which like which OS release Arc deploys back to, this will tell you, and it's iOS 4 and 10.6 without weak references, which is called ArcLight, by the way. That's a little I don't know what you call it, but it's a little piece of code that makes it so that Arc works on 10.6. But full Arc is 10.7, etc. So this is just useful. That's the URL, but just Google Objective-C Feature Availability Index. And then CF Auto Release. So this is another new in iOS 7 thing. And I don't know why I got excited about this. Probably nobody else is excited about it, but I am. It does just what it says. So if you've worked with Core Foundation before, you know that Core Foundation has some similar memory management rules to Objective-C. The difference is Arc doesn't deal with Core Foundation memory management for you. You still have to deal with it. So the rules are pretty simple. If you get something back from a function that has create or copy in it, then you need to release it when you're done with it. Kind of like if you got it with alloc init or copy in Objective-C. And then anything else, if it doesn't have create or copy in it, then it's auto released, right? You need to retain it if you want to keep it around. So that's all fine and good, but the problem really is that what if you want to create your own function that returns a Core Foundation object, but does not, that's not a create function. You want to auto release it because that's kind of like the easy, nice thing to do, right? It keeps other people or whoever's calling the function from having to add an extra release in there, assuming they're just using the Core Foundation object for a little while, which is kind of usually how they're used, or often anyway. So before, there was not really a good solution to this. You could do this. This worked for, at least for toll-free bridged classes. Man, my code is so horrible. You don't need that bridge. You don't need the bridge here. But you could sort of cast your Core Foundation object to its Objective-C equivalent because it's toll-free bridged, and then just auto-release that. So that's not actually that bad, right? It's a little lame because you're actually returning the Core Foundation object. You're just taking advantage of the fact that it's toll-free bridged, and it means you can put it in the auto-release pool. With Arc, this code is horrible, but I mean, really, it's horrible. I just was showing you that you got to do some crazy, stupid workaround that probably won't even work right and will break in a future release. But basically, you can't do it in Arc, not in any reliable, good way. So how do you do it now? Well, all you have to do is just call CF auto release. So that's the gem, but it means you can write functions that return CF auto released or auto released Core Foundation objects, which is really nice. That's it. So this is info for us and Twitter and email addresses, and then well, do you want to do a demo? Because we've got like 10 minutes. So all right, well, Aaron's going to do a demo, but the demo, the sample code, and all our slides are up on GitHub.
So there's a ski bum in your app. Oh, whoops, hold on. I'm going to turn on mirroring. The ski bum is presently in outer space. Okay, here we go. There we go. So if you click the ski bum, whoops, there we go. You get a random skier phrase.
Time to get after it. Steep and deep. Sweet powder dew.
Okay, there you go. So you get Siri's voice. You can actually use the appropriate voice for your localization. And there's methods available for that. But and you can look them up. But here we just use the default. And so here's all the code. Let's go into presentation mode. Using the key shortcuts there we just learned super quick. So that's pretty much it. If it's speaking, let me see if I can interrupt myself here.
Steep and deep. Steep and deep.
Oh.
Steep and deep.
Well, that's not working, but at least we're speaking. All right, so the next one here is UI menu controller. Every ski bum needs a menu. So we have a couple of image view subclasses here. One is the copy image view, and it can become first responder, and it can perform the action copy. Otherwise, it can't do anything. And then it handles the action copy by just putting its image on the pasteboard. Then we have a cut, paste, and flip image view. Similar thing. It can handle paste. If its image is not equal to nil, then we can cut it or flip it. Otherwise, we don't handle the action. For pasting, we just take the image off the pasteboard and set it to our image. And for cutting, we just set our image to nil. So I got, copy that guy, paste it in, flip it around, put another one in there. And I didn't have to write any custom menu or anything like that. Just it integrates nicely with the existing edit action menu. And I think Andrew's got a couple of demos.
Well, really, it's really only one. But this plural demo is the plural localizations. I can show you that it doesn't work. This is my NS data reading mapped safe demo. And first of all, I think the all right. So first of all, I'm gonna I don't know if you can see that. I know I don't know how to change the font. Probably not easily. Yeah. No. This is a little app called Code Runner that I like because it'll just run a single file really easily without creating a whole project and everything. But so I'm initializing the data without that option set, and I don't let the program terminate. I just loop. That's not meant to be real code. It's just so I can show this. But if I run it and then open activity monitor, oh, this is okay. Oh well, yeah. Thanks. I really do need two hands. Oh. How that got broken. swear this was working. All right, so this demo is going to be stupid because I don't have that file. I didn't put it in the repository because it's really 1 gigabyte. You have to generate it with a terminal command. Well, you don't have to, but this is just one way of, I don't know how long it's going to take this to write a gigabyte to disk. It's not exactly a gigabyte, but it's close. It's just random data. We'll see how long this takes. What? Yeah, it's a solid state drive, so I don't remember how long this took when I did it before, but it was not on a solid state drive, so. This is what I get for preparing my presentations on one computer and then presenting them on another. Well, this is getting boring fast. I don't know if it's really worth waiting for. It's the same thing that was in the slides. You'll see that the memory usage of this program will go up to the same size as the file pretty much, and then if you change to the NS data reading mapped if safe option, it will be very low. I got the screenshots for the slides. There we go. So it's done. Let's see if that works. Yeah, okay. And you see memory usage is 955 megabytes, which is huge. So let's stop that. And instead we will use the NS data reading mapped if safe option. And again, we get the exact same result like we expect, but the memory usage is not even on the close to the list at the top, so it's only 2 megabytes now. So did what we hoped it would do. And that's truly the end of our presentation, I think. So I just wanted to leave the info slide. Thank you.